anything else, first, thank you so much for coming tonight. I want to thank the task force for showing up after we missed a month with the storm. But I first have to remind everyone or inform everyone that we are recording for live stream tonight. And so I think it's important for all of us to be aware of that. So again, I'm going to thank the task force and the IPS board members who are dedicated to the well-being of our IPS community for attending tonight. This meeting will continue the conversation of what our students and faculty need to feel safe, included, and valued in our schools. If you are not able to attend the IPS community conversations that took place in June, which were, I thought, really rich and valuable, the ones that I was able to attend, you can visit myips.org to view the presentation and information that was shared. Although we have a plan in place to hear from those who could not be in attendance with us in person, every voice here tonight represents a perspective that is crucial to the function of our schools. I've already shared with you that the meetings are being recorded. If you feel comfortable, we encourage your comments, and we look forward to continued collaboration with each of you and this committee. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Clements, and I am happy to be here. I'm happy that you are with us this evening for another IPS Mental Health and School Culture Task Force meeting. I just want to remind us of our commitment for respect. So it says the task force successfully creates a space for the sharing of sensitive information because our collective commitment to engaging in and modeling respectful communication based on resilient listening, thoughtful questions, and empathetic action. While the task force encourages the attendees to share the content and the information learned in our meeting, we also expect the privacy of individual comments to be respected. And so we gather here, we're an open group. We love the dialogue, but we just want to remain respectful. Tonight we're actually in for a good work session. We have task force members here, and we also have In Trends with us this evening to provide some visuals for the work we did on our first task force meeting, which will help guide us as we move forward in our plan. So I would, Ms. Audrey from In Trends has a presentation to share with us.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. Start. While that's coming up, thank you for rescheduling the meeting. It was great not to have to come out in that storm. We were able to all weather that safely, I hope. So thank you for this time this evening. I really want to take this time to do a couple of things this evening. One is to introduce myself and In Trends. I don't know that all of you know who In Trends is, and I thought it would be a good idea to just spend a minute to tell you who In Trends is. I also want to talk about our philosophy of work because the way that we work with clients is, I think, unique. And I'd like to share that philosophy with you. We also have had a number of partnerships already with IPS, so we're not foreign to the work, and we really are proud to have an opportunity to participate in this work because we believe in what you believe in, and we think that those things are important. As we get into sort of the nuts and bolts of how could we support this work, I want to share with you some themes that we heard that we think might be important to consider when you are doing this work. How do we come up with these themes? We didn't just say, well, let's put some themes to paper and see if those float. No. So I've been at every one of these meetings. I've been sitting there in the back, and and I've been absorbing and listening to the Mental Health and School Culture Task Force meetings and the board meetings that have discussed this topic. And I've researched it and looked online and done all the things that we should be doing to familiarize ourselves with the work. This is not about just, oh, we have a partnership and let's just put some things to paper, move that forward. No, we start differently than that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to show you the themes that I heard. And also there's an opportunity, if you'd like, to see some of the questions that we think could come as a result of those themes. So that's what I have planned for today. One of the things that I wanted to start with, though, is when I went back and sort of started preparing for this meeting, I said, you know, there's some opportunity to take a step back and look at some language. And this was in the resolution back in April of 2024 that talked about the establishment of the Mental Health and School Culture Task Force. I want to read this to you because I think that as we think about a foundation for this work, some of this is just critical. And I won't read the whole thing, but I think that when we talk about taking bold steps with this community, with clear intention, fostering leadership, these are the words that pop up. Toward the end, it says, we are aware that there is no solving an issue without facing it. We take seriously the role of scribes for the future. These words tell future generations what was important to us. What is critically important to us right now is for our students to feel loved and safe in our schools. This creates the environment where learning can take place. There were a lot of powerful words in that document, but I looked at those and said, you know, we really want to get grounded in what a true partnership looks like. And in order to do that, it's important for us to understand not only what you want to do, but what your heart is as you're doing these things. So as I go through this information, it's with that lens, it's with that partnership that we welcome the opportunity to work with you. So who is in Trends? We're a women-owned management consulting firm. We've been in business for over a decade. Same president who has been in business for that length of time. We are a local company, but we have a national reach. So our clients are both Indianapolis-based, Indiana-based, and national-based. We do have a couple of international projects that we're working on, but that's not the lion's share of what we do. We really are focused on Indianapolis and the region. When we think about in Trends, think about it in terms of having certain verticals. So there's a people practice vertical, which I am a part of. There is a finance and audit arm. There is a language service arm. There is a operational excellence arm. And when we approach clients, or when clients approach us, it's usually within one of those verticals that we say to ourselves, where can we provide the most? So as I come to explain what we can do, this is under our people practice. It's what will allow us to partner with you and sort of understand what your client is. I mentioned also here, I mentioned that we have a training and development arm that's part of the work we do. So when I talk about our philosophy of work, it's about these four things. It's about your vision drives the strategy. We don't come to you with a vision about what you should do or how you should think. We listen, we try to figure out what is your strategy, what is your vision. And I've heard that in many of the meetings that I've attended. I've heard that in other one-on-one conversations. So it's now a platform that we are beginning to understand. I won't say that I understand 100% of what you go through on a daily basis. I think that would be a little disingenuous. But what I do is look for your vision and your strategy at each step along the way. Secondly, we don't really start with a template. We start with listening. And we reject the sort of one size fits all, because it's really not about that. So even though we have an expertise, I do come to the process with 30 years of human resource experience in the US and abroad, and have managed all the HR functions and culture and alignment and all those things. I also teach the consulting practice at Columbia University, so I have some things to bring to the table. But we don't start with a template. We start with what you need, and then we take our expertise and color in the lines that you've drawn for us. We go from listening to action. We want to sit down. We have a lot of pre-meetings, and then we say to ourselves, let's put a plan in place. Let's take action. Let's be deliberate, and let's deliver on what you brought us to the table to do. And finally, there are many instances where success means that we start a ball rolling and you continue the ball rolling. That's probably the best outcome, that you don't need someone else to continue to say, let's talk about how these things are going to be put in place, that you have the ability, the momentum already built up to sustain what's in place. So that's our philosophy. That's how Intrends works. That's our approach to all of our clients. So you might say, well, what do you know about IPS? We've had for a number of years now many partnerships. I won't go into all the detail on those, probably not as important as to say we've had projects that we've worked where we have done projects and we've been brought back to the table and back to the table again for various things, both in operations and also in the schools. Now, I haven't been in every school. I probably haven't been in a lot of schools, but I've been in some schools a lot. And it does allow me to say, when people say, well, have you ever even walked in a school? Do you even know what it looks like at lunchtime or what it looks like when parents are there at the end of the day? Yes, I have some data points on that. And I try to put myself and our team in those places so that we can see firsthand what is going on. So our partnerships have lasted several years, and we hope that they will continue to do so. So how would we support this project? We think about this as an end-to-end process, and this comes a simple schematic on how this might look. We don't start at the launch phase, though. We start pre-launch, because in order to launch something, we need to really listen for a while. We need to partner. We need to look at resources. We need to look at budget. We need to look at a lot of things that are going to create or lead to the success. So with the Mental Health and School Culture Task Force, we have talked about and are prepared to conduct surveys among parents and guardians, among teachers and staff, and also among students themselves. And I'll show you some more detail on how that might look as we move forward. But we would conduct surveys. We believe that surveys are not enough. We believe that sometimes you have to drill down on what you heard in the survey in order to make sure that when you do react, that you're reacting to really existing themes and not something that someone said loudly. It really needs to be the things that people say. And so we're trained in how to listen. We're trained in how to conduct those. And I believe that we've had some very high levels of success in doing that. As it says on this slide, to drive real change, you need more than just data. So sometimes the surveys give us data. And how we design those in terms of quantitative versus qualitative surveys sort of depends on how, as we move forward together, how you may want that to look. We definitely need quantitative data so that we can analyze that. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention on that first slide that Ed Beverly is my colleague at Intrends. He's our internal data analyst, an absolute expert in survey analysis, design, and delivery back to clients. So he is my right-hand person when it comes to survey data, both qualitative and quantitative. And we invest, it's easy, as you probably know, to analyze quantitative data. It's that qualitative data where, like I said, one person speaks very loudly or very adamant about something, but they might be the only person who feels like that. And there might be a tendency to over quantify or qualify what that person might be saying. It doesn't say we don't listen to that person, but there's an art and a science to surveys, both surveys and focus group sessions. We also think, best practice tells us that if you survey and you do focus groups to validate, hone in on things, that sometimes you also need some interviews. Because the person who didn't fill out the survey, didn't come to the focus group, might be really willing to sit down and have a conversation. Or you could use those kinds of conversations to, again, validate what information has been received. So we do surveys, followed by focus groups, followed by interviews, and then deliver a final report. Final report is not the end of the process. It's the end of a phase, because then the decision has to be made, well, what will we do with this information? I've seen countless organizations that have conducted surveys like this, and they get the information, they get the themes, and they don't do anything with it. And the problem with that is that everyone loses trust in the process. You asked me, I was really open about my feedback, but I didn't hear any results. I didn't hear anything. Like, the survey is finished, we're finished with the process, we know we can't implement everything, but this is what we're doing. That's a really critical part of this process. And we have always encouraged clients to incorporate that into. So the end of the process is really not, we have the data, we have the qualitative and quantitative information. It's, we have this information, what really are we going to do with it? And when I added that paragraph at the beginning of my comments, it's a responsibility. And I know you have that, right? I can feel it, I can sense it, I hear it. So what we can do is help you deliver on some communication that allows people to know this was a valuable process overall. So when we get into the themes themselves, how did these themes come about? These came about by me listening to all of you in your meetings. I took copious notes in every meeting, came to every meeting, decided to look at those notes, went back, consolidated them. Then I shared them with some members of your committee to say, do you think this is on track? It was pretty much on track. I would say it was maybe 90%, but we did go back and we fine-tuned a little bit. I want to pause there by saying, we do that whenever we need to. This is not a railroad that just pushes ahead without ever stopping and calibrating, because if the product at the end is going to be valuable, then you have to stop every once in a while and say, are we on track? Sometimes we may say, yep, move full steam ahead. And sometimes we may say, well, wait a minute, I remember that we wanted to incorporate X, Y, Z. So let's do that now, so that when we get to the end, we'll have everything that we want to think about. Again, no process is perfect, but we put in those stop points to say, are we there, rather than getting at the end and saying, oh my goodness, we forgot to do whatever. So those are things that we put in place. So that's how I came up with these survey themes. I won't even call them my survey themes. This is about listening to what was said around the table. Many of you came up with a lot of these, most of these. So when we think about themes for a survey, or focus groups, or listening sessions, what we might do is just say, there are some survey themes that apply to everyone. And those are the 7 that you see on the left side of the screen here. But in addition to that, for specific audiences, we may want to add a few more themes. So you see 3 additional themes for teachers and staff, which means in this proposal, teachers and staff would have 10 themes that would be addressed in the focus, in the survey questions. Parents and guardians, another 2. So they would have 9 altogether. And students and students would have 3 themes added to their 7. Now, you'll notice here that on the students, we have that separated into grades 3 through 5 versus grades 6 through 12. Because the research tells us that, yes, all students can be surveyed to some extent. The mode has to be discussed and decided upon, but they can be surveyed. However, if we tried to give the same questions to a 3rd grader or a 12th grader, I don't have to tell you, you're the experts on that, right? So there are ways to separate that into the 3rd through 5th grade and the 6th through 12th grade. in order to have a survey that people understand, can easily respond to. And I particularly like the 3 to 5-year-old group. I have a 4-year-old grandson, and I can't imagine him taking a survey. And so it would have to be done in a unique way, but it is possible, and I'm sure all of you know that. So that would be sort of high level what the themes could be for this. And this is again based on the conversations you've had, the themes that you've highlighted, the things you want to know about. Is it all inclusive? I'm certainly, here for questions and thoughts, because you may say, there's something else there, or maybe there are two things that seem to duplicate each other. So your feedback in this is going to be critical, and one of the purposes of us getting together today. I found this quote, just to take a pause, to build a culture of trust and learning, schools must listen deeply to the voices of students, families, and teachers. Obvious, but I came across this from this professor who's at University of Southern Cal. He's also taught at NYU and UCLA. And again, it's just nice to see how things are validated in simple language, from some of the experts in this industry. So where do we go from here? Couple of things. I know you can't see all of these, but I do want you to know the thinking that we have put into this so far, and the ability to say to ourselves, what could we be asking? So we drafted some survey questions that you see here, and aligned those with the themes that I just talked about. One, to make sure that all the themes are covered. Two, to make sure that the questions really are getting at the information we want. And we can send this out to you. We'll send this out to you so you have especially a copy of these survey questions. But these are the survey questions that we propose for teachers and staff. These are the questions that we proposed for parents and guardians. I'm going against my rule of you have to be able to read the slide, so just know that I know that. Okay. We have a proposed survey questions for students in grades 3 through 5, and then survey questions for grades 6 through 12. So when we think about a process, we like to take a process to a point and then say, how can we work together from here? Or what questions do you have from here? It's how we work with a lot of our clients. Again, we plan, we listen, we deliver some ideas to you, we take a step back, and we plan and deliver again. These are some of the clients that we've worked with. Don't need to make any comments on that, but I do want to just say we understand the urgency and need for getting into the minds and hearts of teachers and staff and students, as well as parents and guardians. The whole title, Mental Health and School Culture, we want to align these tactical things with the things that you want to see, and that down the road, when you come to a point to say, are we successful, that hopefully we can have undergirded a process that can help you get there. Thank you for your time this evening. Are there any questions that I can answer for you about our approach, or even about our organization? Do you have copies of the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. I remember as I was looking at those, I thought we had copies of those ready for last time. So. Any questions or comments?
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to surveying of the students, was there any consideration given to 6 through 8 and grouping them separately from the 9 to 12 group?
So we have not done that. However, we don't have any, I don't think that there would be any reason not to do that. Again, our expertise that we bring is in the design, delivery, feedback, sustainability, all of those things. And it takes all of us to make this successful. So if there's a reason that 6th, 7th, and 8th should be different, we would simply separate that. Now, I can tell you that we wouldn't just separate it and say, oh, okay, let's just kind of give them the same questions. We would go back and do some more research on that to say, what's unique about them? Because the question, as the question comes up, I'm sure it's coming from a point of, there might be a reason to separate those. So
Absolutely.
right? So when we talk about themes or when we talk about the actual questions, we would want to listen again and then produce something for that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade population.
And just making sure that they're developmentally appropriate and understanding the difference in the environment of the middle school versus the high school.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Would this, the outcome of this give us a cultural climate assessment of each of the schools? Like, how broad is this going to, or is this going to just be a sample of students?
So from a data analysis standpoint, we will talk about what demographics need to be captured with the survey. It's also a part of the design. So if we ask for school or anything else that would be an identifier, that would give us an opportunity to separate things by school. And that would just depend on what you would want as a final outcome. So if you said, I just want a district-wide look at everything, then we wouldn't even put that demographic question on. But if you say, and this is sort of like begin with the end in mind, if you think that you want culture information by school, I think we would need to do 2 things. One, we would need to make sure that we capture that in the demographics when we ask people, who are you in the survey? And we don't need to ask their names. That's all part of the pre-launch work. You know, what do you want the outcome to look like? Then we can back into, then this is a process we can put in place. So if you want that information, you would ask the question, and then our data analysts would be able to pull this information and give you a snapshot by school. Yes.
You wrap off of that, I think a snapshot by school is incredibly important, so that we can see what's happening. If everything's blended together, it's a little harder to see what's actually happening in one unique spot. But my question was, what is the timeline? And if this has already been addressed, I apologize. Like in our last meeting, I wasn't able to attend. When are we hoping to send out the surveys, and what is our role as members of the task force on getting there?
Okay. So we haven't decided. We don't
Maybe
have.
that's a question for you.
It's probably more question there, but you know, we have what I would call a sequencing. We know what needs to happen first, and then after that, and after that. What we don't have is a start date yet, and that would need to be determined by Commissioner Sarr or Ms. Buwana. Do you have a thought on that?
So when we talk about time frame, we did talk about this a little bit, Kristen, and I apologize everyone for not ever saying my name when I get on this microphone. I'm Commissioner Hope Starr, and thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing some of the comments from 8015. When I wrote that, thankfully, prior to any AI, I was super passionate, and I'm thankful that the board is just as passionate at the time, but they also continue to be so, even though we are a different incarnation of folks than the ones who said yes to this task force, right? We are a newer board, a different makeup, but we also feel very passionately about the culture and climate in our schools. And we wanted this to be a group of folks who were outside of the district helping to figure out what it is that we need to know so that we know that we are providing a safe environment for our kids, a healthy place where everybody can thrive. And we're not just our kids, obviously our staff and our teachers too, but you know, we are here to educate children. And they are, you know, at the end of the day, while teaching is extremely important, we need our teachers, right? And our team. But children are the most vulnerable. And so that's how we kind of got here, and what we've been doing, getting this infrastructure together, and now figuring out that it took a lot to get the right committee, it took a lot to get the right chair, we spent a long time getting to here. And now what we'd like to do is update the community in December, especially now that I don't know what the outcome of that would be, but I would want to update them about where we are. I think we saw ourselves beginning the school year with preparing our school community, getting you all to make sure that what we have here is what we think we want to know, which is sort of where we started at our first meeting. This is a reflection of what this committee came up with, and I hope you all see that, that this is you reflected back. And so we think we have some really bright minds in this conversation and work here at the table, and you all gave us this. And so then Insurance is helping to add a little bit more data to it, but just kind of make this fit the areas. And I'm so glad that, Isha, thank you so much for bringing up the middle school population, and that it is they're different age range, it's different in terms of, what was the word I'm looking for? Don't know. Sometimes I hate getting this age. I can't remember anything.
Different developmental
Thank you.
milestones.
Developmental, thank you, middle school. So I think that is very, very important. And so that's why you all are here, is to make sure we don't miss stuff like that. I just want you to know that this current board, we are still extremely committed to making sure that this feels like it is not internal work. At least that is important to me. Enough so that even though I think that what pushed me to get us here is important, I find myself wanting to be a little quiet. I'm going to hear from all of you because we needed voices that aren't me. And sometimes even as a board member, I wonder how internal it feels for me to be at the table. Maybe I should have started and walked away. So it could be more external. But here we are, and we hope to begin the school year by alerting our school communities, moving along quickly to getting information from the survey data, and then being able to at least update in December. We decide then, where do we go from here? And that's especially poignant, and given what we've been through during legislative session, what's going on now with IOEA, all of those things impact timing too. So we need you all to answer some of these questions with me.
This is Kate Barrow, the Governor's Council for People with Disabilities, and I wanted to ask a couple of questions. First, in the demographic section of the survey, at least for the parents and guardians, is there a question that relates to being a family member of a child with an IEP or a 504 plan, or identifying as a parent or guardian of a child with intellectual or developmental disabilities? Would be one recommendation.
Right. So let me back up by saying we have conducted a number of surveys for IPS already in different pockets. Nothing district-wide, but a lot of different things. And I want to answer that question, and it relates to the last question also, really about processing timing. So the start of this process, external, is some communication that this is coming to the audiences who will be getting a survey. So that's everyone. That's parents, parents and guardians, and students, and that's teachers and staff. So everyone should know this is coming. So there's a communication phase that we work with you on. We write the communication, we vet it with you, we send it out, or you can send it out. We've done it both ways for surveys with IPS with different schools. Sometimes it's better for us to send it out, and sometimes from an anonymity standpoint, and sometimes it's better for the school to send it out. So that's the first process in getting this done. When we launch a survey, when we design a survey, I've shared with you the questions and themes, but there's some other parts of that survey that we should talk about and meet to decide what do we want to capture. And it's demographics, it's balance of questions, it's does this lead to the outcomes that we want? What are the mechanisms behind delivering the survey? Who sends it? Who gets the feedback? So when we talk about asking certain questions or talking about does it capture the views of certain audiences. It will, as long as we embed that in the process going forward in the planning. So when we design the survey, including all of the this is the survey that we told you about, here's the survey, would you complete the survey, send it back. We decide on time frame, how long should it take, we set up reminders, so we build a whole project plan. And I'll share something with you, we built the project plan for this from a sequencing standpoint, like what needs to happen next and then next and then next. And we really wanted to, there's a lot that goes into this, because this is a large project. There's a lot that goes into this. And I really want to take the time to say, you didn't know too much about interns before tonight. Like, who is this who's proposing this work? So I think it's important to understand who we are, how we work, and to see that we're listening to you by providing some survey themes and some survey questions. There's a lot of on the ground work that I would want to do with you in terms of developing the demographics, the timing, the communication. All of those things are part of this work. And like I said, I like to work with sequencing, like what needs to happen first and then next, and how there's some things that can happen at the same time. I'm glad that all of you are involved in this conversation, and I hope that some or all of you could be involved in the rollout and the decisions about who and how this touches recipients. So I know that's a long answer to the question, but it all comes in we haven't really decided yet and had those conversations on the technical aspects of the survey. Yes.
Just one more. When I think about a cultural climate survey, and you have some of the questions that, like our Likert scale questions and ratings and those sorts of things, I just wonder if an outcome for a school could be some kind of benchmark that gives, some kind of score in different areas. So then we could do the same survey the next year to see if there's some progress or if they fell back. So that's more work and more money, but it would be ideal to do some kind of annual cultural climate survey and use that to help on how we take a look at schools.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. One is when we focus on mental health and school culture, and I listened to the conversations leading us up to today, the themes that you see that I presented are the ones that I heard. If you want to go further than that, that would be up to you. Again, beginning with the end in mind. It's important for all of you to think about, what do I want to know at the end? The last thing any of us want or need is to have a beautiful survey and I give you the results and you say, that's really not what I was getting at. So it's going to be really important to talk about what those end products are. Yeah, ideally, there are surveys that are conducted on a regular basis, but you're right, that's a lot of time.
Yes.
We have, but we also know that we have to think about budget also. And that's everybody. Yes.
I got a question about the questions. Was there when you look at perspective and voice, when you selected these questions, was there any input from these respective audiences to help design or how to fit these specific questions? Like if you ask a question to a child, it's coming from an adult. But sometimes if you ask the same question from the voice of a child, they receive it different. Was there any consideration when designing these questions?
Definitely segmenting different populations. If I look at I think if you look at this 3 to 5 year olds list, those feel like questions that you talk to a 3 or 5-year-old. However, if there's a voice issue with any of the questions, because this is the first time you're seeing these. You know, we took this from themes to questions, and it's going to be important for us to get feedback on, does this work for a lot of arenas? So voice, applicability, is it going to get us the information we really want? So any feedback you have. So what would you recommend? Is there a recommendation?
Just as a reminder though, the questions do come out of the themes that we created in the first meeting. So if you look at those post-its and all that work we did,
Yeah,
they're pretty much here. But I understand your
Right.
question too.
Right, coming
Where
from
the real
adults
questions
with,
come in.
you know, you adult minds, you know, like having this is just an example, you know, maybe having someone in this age who would go, like, what's important to you? How do you, you know, maybe like a trial run, like a small group, or how do they receive the question? Things like that. Or, you know, or from a parent's perspective, a parent may say, for the parent question, such and such is not in there, or, you know, I don't know. But
Yes.
just that input before, sometimes before we get to the final draft, like, I think it's important for them to have.
Are you saying sort of test the questions with the audience prior to launch?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So I think that's a great idea. I think there's 2 things. Since this is the first time you've had a chance to react to the questions, and they do come from the themes, and so it's really important that every one of you on this task force can buy in to these questions. And so if you have feedback, you know, we'd love to get the feedback. They could be big things or it could be nuanced things that it would be important for us to know. So I hope that you'll allow that process to take place so that at the end of the day, when that survey goes out, all of you know that you had a chance to have some input. We fine-tuned some things that made sense, and that you at least had a voice in how this is going to roll out. In terms of kind of, what do they call that, beta testing? With an audience prior to, we have not done that with IPS because it's a little more cumbersome. It adds some more weight to the project as a whole, but it's an excellent idea. And we've done it in some corporate accounts where they have time to say, okay, let's test this with the audience before we even launch, and then fine tune. So I think that's going to be up to you whether you want to interject that phase in it, and we can certainly look at that and add that to our thought process.
I do think
it would be, this is Kate Barrow again, I do think it would be especially helpful for that phase with the grades 3 through 5, especially with different learning modalities. And sometimes our kiddos, especially in the IDD world, respond better to pictures and images, and they have the opportunity to provide input as well, especially as kids who frequently experience bullying and exclusion because of disability. So I would consider that maybe engaging with some special educators on how to create a survey instrument with these themes and questions using modalities from special ed.
Great idea. Okay, thank you for that. Yes?
to add on to this, I love these as a starting point. What I would love to see is maybe presenting these to a segment of staff or a segment of students and seeing if they have things they would like to add, because I am not a teacher in a classroom. I am a parent, so I can weigh in on that. I'm not a student. So I think we all have important things to add, but I would like to know what our students want to have asked of them and what our staff wants to have asked of them. And so I hear myself saying like a pre-survey, but that's not what I mean. And whether that's us as a task force going in I would be happy, I would love to do that. I don't know what that looks like. I just would like to know what our community would also like to be asked when
Yeah,
it comes to these things.
I think that's good. I think that's part of our work, as a unit, which is the next step. Now that we have the sample questions based on the categories we brainstormed at our other meeting, will be to kick around the questions, one, to make sure they're the questions that we feel are appropriate, two, to look at how the question is being asked, which I think you were getting at, because I think that's also important. That's going to be our work, and we might have to pull some grade level specialists or experts into that conversation to guide us, and then provide insurance feedback based on that work that we do as a community.
So another hand?
I'm Tina Michael, and my question would be, based off of our conversation, it sounds like we're saying that we'd like to conduct the interviews and the group discussions prior to the surveys. Is that what I'm hearing us say?
So if I can, like, nationwide children's policy and law initiative, to me, it sounds like focus groups that are sharing what their needs are based on our needs, and then mirroring the questions to make sure there's alignment with what their expected outcomes are and our expected outcomes. Does that sound right?
And I don't know that we've necessarily come up in with the order of things, and we can kick that all around for sure. But the focus groups absolutely are critical to, again, gives us some of the how you feel, as opposed to them rating or saying yes or no, right? We want that information in the interviews or deeper dive in, right? But I don't know that necessarily we come up with the exact cycle how those will roll out. I think the initial thought was the survey first. That's a send out, right? Where you're not touching that, you're not scheduling. That's a send out. People respond, you get the results, and then insurance does their work of the crunching the data, looking at the things, that sort of deal. And that doesn't mean there's not overlap in scheduling the focus groups around the district, and then selecting who will be interviewed in the district, that sort of deal. So I think some of these things are going to overlap and happen at the same time. And I think the initial intention was for survey to go out first because it's the larger audience.
If I can pick up on that, I also, I hear that there are some filters that we want to send some of this information through prior to the survey. Not a focus group, but thinking about, sort of special ed or getting this with each audience to see whether these questions. So I think what you're saying is that you might take responsibility for doing that, but we build that into the whole process. So that by the time we get the questions that go into the survey, they've been vetted many different ways, right? Okay, and then we could do a survey, and when I mentioned focus groups, I meant that process that takes place after we see the survey data that says, now let's take the survey results and vet that through some audiences. So I think there's like several steps, and what we can do is map this out, because I was going to say that one of the next steps that I envision in this process is to share with you what a mapping of this looks like. And you've brought some things to the table today that I think would be really valuable to put in there, and we could talk about sort of who does what in that pathway. Does that make sense? Okay. What other questions? Sorry.
I did have another question.
Sure.
Are we gonna add K through 2? And then if we are, or if we're not, are we into adding their parents in that conversation if they weren't in the survey? So that was those are 2 questions.
Have you surveyed
I think it's 3 to 5 year olds, so
Yeah.
I was just.
What you were wondering about the ones right before that?
Well, this is, this is 3rd to 5th grade, and so just the ones younger, and then if we're not doing them, then are we surveying their parents?
I think the parents would be great.
Okay.
Find out what the experience is early.
Good question. Yeah.
So in the work that we do in our field, we have to do kind of a survey or an evaluation of the landscape that already exists when it comes to service delivery systems. It sounds like there may be pre-existing data that kind of illustrates access, some of these access points that are listed in the questions, like how easy is it to access mental health services? Is that something that would kind of assist in goal development for this work group? Is that part of your sequencing process to look at what's already captured in some state level that I know that we have some of this data as far as mental health access? I'm thinking primarily of system of care, wraparound services, children who are experiencing trauma and maybe involved in the DCS system. There's surveys that already exist in those areas, and I don't know if that's part of the conversation, but it might be worthwhile to explore, so we're not duplicating efforts as part of data collection.
Yeah, I remember even in one of your previous meetings, maybe it was you, I'm not sure if you or someone else who brought that up. I have it in my notes that as we think about the mental health and school culture task force, there are other things that should be discussed at the same time to make sure there's not duplication, to make sure there are not answers that are already answered, so we don't have to duplicate that effort. So we would need your guidance on, so when you think about these questions, if you think that it's being addressed someplace else, or someone has already spent the time studying that, I think that's another lens that you have to look through in order to decide, are these the right questions, or do we take something out because we already have data on that?
And I believe that some of that data is captured in the district in the panorama. That's a good, right, so we should pull that to look at that. Yes.
Sorry, I love questions like this and opportunities to ask questions. I know you've kind of addressed already sample size, that was a previous question. When you're looking at sample size across the district, what's your anticipated or goal response rate for those surveys? And is that something that we need to help provide advice on? And are there incentives for families, staff, and youth? So I know that's a money question, right? But folks don't like to take surveys unless there is an incentive. And some of that I'm sure could be part of the marketing discussion and the communication strategy. I'm thinking of kids like an ice cream party for
We
kids.
do actually have some ideas
Okay.
around engaging the community to encourage them to participate. So we have a great group. I love all the questions.
Yes, I do too.
Yes. Yes, but we probably don't have ice cream.
Little
There'll be-
things that are on the next.
Yes, there'll be no pieces of it.
I can tell you of the surveys we have done, in specific schools, and I didn't bring that data with me, but I can certainly share it with you. The participation rates were very high. And we talked about this ahead of time to think about its wording, its timing, one of the big things, in any survey, whether it's an employee survey or this kind of survey, is to think about what environment is that survey being dropped into. What's happening the week, the month that the survey drops, that might tell, that people may say, not much going on, I'm gonna go ahead and fill out the survey, or, oh, I just can't do a survey. I mean, all these things are going on, so it's important to think about that. But we've had a lot of success in getting high participation rates, and I'd be happy to bring back some data, if you wanna see that specific data. Wouldn't necessarily be by school, just for confidentiality, but just what we surveyed, who we surveyed, and what the participation rates were. Yes?
When you're talking about the execution of the survey, it brings to mind user experience. Are we able to somehow see a sample or a template of how you survey before, just to get an understanding of the human experience with that process as well?
We can share that information with you.
Thank you.
And I think it's particularly relevant because it was some of the same populations that we're talking about here. Any other questions?
Are some of the questions, are you open-ended so that we can get additional feedback on those? Like if the question was asked a certain way that they wanted to add to it, just for that qualitative stuff, we have that.
Yes, we typically leave an open-ended question at the end. Is there anything else you want to share? And we got a lot of information through that too, and we add that to the qualitative analysis and look at the themes and the issues, or recommend or praises. You know, it's not all negative. You're going to get a diverse set of feedback with all of these mini survey.
And the thing, remember, we're going to take the things that come out in the qualitative data, that's what we're going to use for focus groups, right? So
Yes.
we're going to, based on the data, we'll be able to narrow the question in even more for the focus group participants to get more of that. Because that's what really that's all about, right? We want the feeling, we want the thought behind the answer, and those groups can pull that out for us, which is that's a good question.
Any other questions? I would just like to say, before I leave, that I would like to consider this I'd like to consider that we're a part of your field, that we are here to, guide the conversations around how this moves forward, but each of you have a unique perspective in how this looks and a personal and professional ownership over how it rolls out. So I hope that our conversations can be that conversation. This is where we are, this is our plan. What do you think about the plan? Are we good to go? These are some things that I've heard, and with the sort of sequencing that I've already put together, what I plan to do is go back and just insert the things that came out today and send that back to you as an initial plan. So, we need to talk about details and how much of this we want to take on. We can take it on, but we want to talk about what's feasible. Because I know you also want to have a deliverable by December. So that's a lot. And we want to help you to get there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I don't want folks, committee, anybody here, I want to say, first of all, thank you all for the input that you shared tonight. It's invaluable. And I apologize for side conversations, and I want to let you all know that if I'm being a wet blanket at all, there was a wet blanket in the room on me too, telling me to think about how we're going to execute what we're going to do, because, we all live in this same country right now. This is a tough moment for us to figure out. This is ambitious work. It's more ambitious, I think, than I even, I think I knew I wanted it to be every school and everything and dig under. I think that was the purpose. But getting into it, we realized this is what we would like to accomplish is going to require quite a bit, and you do have to invest in it. So we're having to figure out how to get to where we want to be, how to learn as much as we possibly can about our schools' cultures without going through every dollar that the district has to do this. And then using and being resourceful and wise too. Just being good stewards at the end of the day. If we have some data, how do we use leverage that to glean where we want to go next with that information. How do we bring a small group together? And Kate over here sharing with me, hey, what about this idea that somebody might sponsor something? So I want to open up that to this group too, that you guys all bring, I brought you, we begged you to be here because of your minds and the way you think and the work that you do and how that impacts trauma and school culture and mental health and all the great work that you do in community. But let's not forget, you also are resourceful. And so I know you have resources, Christian parents. I mean, everybody here, you're working in community, you're working with our families who have sometimes the least in our community. So we're working with traumatized people and we're solving out here. So if you have friends, food trucks, folks who want to donate the ice cream or any of that, I think that's stuff that we continue to talk about too. And I think it will just hopefully make our experience richer. I think the work is ambitious. You haven't met my wet blanket yet. It's my wet blanket. You can't have that. We want it all. So it is, and because it's ambitious work, it's also, I don't think, quick work. And I want to, I don't even know if what I'm doing is apologizing, but I do want to say, after the groundwork and the urgency that I feel, you saw the statement, you know how passionate I am. I don't have to keep saying that. But that makes me feel urgency, but I also know great things don't always happen quickly. So I'm going to need you all's help with that too. I wanted to report to community. I didn't want our community to feel like, hey, that resolution was written then and we haven't, what are you doing? Chop, chop. But as we sit here, we realize and dig into this, what we need to know because of this passion and because of how important it is, can't be done quickly. And so I could use you all's help with how quickly we go and how deep we can get and sharing your resources and not just your amazing minds. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
All right. We did want to make sure that if there was any public comment or questions that we allotted some space for that. So if you have a comment or question, you can do that at this time. All right, seeing none, we appreciate you coming out and hanging with us this evening. Definitely for our task force, we appreciate you being here. This is super important work. I'm glad that we're on the team together to do the work. Our community deserves it. Our students deserve it. And, it's not going to be fast, but it will be good. Right? And I think that's really the commitment. It doesn't have to move fast as long as it moves good. And we really want to hear from our community about how they are faring in our schools, what our schools feel like, what our services in schools feel like. As I lead Morningstar, I often say it's not what we do most, it's how we do what we do, right? And it's really important. I believe our kids are going to school and learning and they're having opportunities, but how they feel about it matters. And we want it to be the best, which is bring that to the forefront. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And with that, we're adjourned.